Hey everyone, here I wanted to just cover a couple things as you're getting started on the next learning plan. Chapter 5 in the Level 2 book, and I wanted to go over a couple things. For this week, first of all, let me just open up the learning plan here in Blackboard. Learning Plan 8 is covering Chapter 5 in Level 2. Chapter 5 is working on sorting text in paragraphs, columns, and tables. So often, we think of sorting, we just think of sorting lists, but sometimes you have specific information that you're working with that's actually in paragraphs of information or in columns of information, and you can have Word sort that even though it's in a sentence or a paragraph. Word can sort those things, so you're going to work with that first. The second thing that you're going to work with is we've worked with data files, data sources in Word when we're doing mail merging. And for this chapter, it's going to go over how you can filter that data source, or you can sort the data source. You can select specific records in your data source. So this chapter will go over that as well. And finally, you're also going to do inserting footnotes and endnotes and doing sources and citations within Word. So I want to show you a couple things. First of all, I want to go into the sorting part of the chapter. So here's just an example of one of the documents you're going to be doing for this week. This is the final document. And I just want to go into the recipient list. So when you have your recipient list, you select your recipients or you type them in from this when you're in the Mailings tab. You either type it in right in here or you select from a file that you already have. But once you have it selected, you can edit it here. So here I have my list of people. And we've seen this before in earlier chapters, and Level 1 is where we started it, but you've worked on this since. And I just want to remind you again, when you're in a data source like this, you can adjust in things so you can see things better. I can adjust it like this so I can read it. But this is where you're going to come in to sort within this area. You can filter within this area. I can deselect certain files or certain people if I want to. Or select them all again. This top button here either deselects all or selects all. So I just wanted to kind of point that out quickly so that you understand what the book is telling you to do when you get to this point. So here's all your recipients. You can sort, filter, other options as well, but just the most thing that we'll be working on here is sorting and filtering. So, in this particular case, we have everybody from the state of California, but let's say we only wanted to send or create labels for people from a certain city, Ontario. I could filter by that city, and I don't have to just check it here. I can actually go through a filtering process. So that's how you'll be working with labels and merging within this chapter, is being more specific on what you want to merge. The next thing I wanted to point out to you that you're going to be going over is footnotes and endnotes. And the first thing you're going to come across are endnotes. And I'll tell you in that first, I should have the page number with me, but I don't have my book with me at the moment. I just want to go over the difference between the two. So we have endnotes and footnotes. You've probably seen footnotes before in books. You see a little number next to a paragraph, and then at the end, at the bottom of the page, you have the footnote. Endnotes, very similar, but instead of at the bottom of the page, they all appear at the end of your document instead, at the end of the last paragraph in the document. So you can see here, I can see the number 4 there corresponds with the number 4 endnote. And I can see up here, this is one thing I want to point out. In the directions for the book, it'll tell you to open this file, Tech Visionaries, and click after the second paragraph under the heading Gordon Moore. This is where they want you to be. It's kind of confusing, the direction, when they tell you to do that. It almost makes you feel like you want to click after Gordon Moore here, but they really want you at the end of the second paragraph under Gordon Moore. So I just wanted to point that out. That can be a little confusing. So endnotes, you put them in, you type in the information, they appear at the end of your document. Different from footnotes appear at the end of the page. So they're first going to have you do endnotes, and then they're going to have you kind of go through and do the same thing, but move them into footnotes. And then the footnote appears at the end of the page instead of at the end of the document. Footnotes, different from a footer. We've worked with headers and footers. We put page numbers in our footers here at the bottom of the page. different from a footnote. Footnote, endnote are referencing information from wherever they receive their source. So this again is going to be a chapter of some things that you might find helpful in the workplace. My guess is the sorting and filtering sort of thing might be more helpful. You may come across times where you have to use endnotes or footnotes, or in this case too, you're going to create a citation page at the end of this chapter. But this is more of a for your information sort of chapter. So because of that, I'm not having you do any of the exercises at the end of the chapter from your workbook. I'm just having you work through the files in the chapter. So you're going to work through the entire chapter. You can see it's kind of a lengthy chapter, pages 157 to 190. And you can see there's a lot of files that you're going to be submitting for this. So one thing I am going to ask you to do when you do submit the homework is that you zip or compress the files all together. So I just want to show you how to do this in case you're not quite sure how to do that. On my desktop here, I have some files that I can, so you have all your files saved somewhere. What you can do is I'm just grabbing my mouse and selecting all these files. I can select the files that I want to zip together. I can right click on any of the files and I can choose send to compressed or zipped folder. Now, probably the one negative of that is it just gives it a name for me. And I don't want it to be called Pine Hills Newsletter. I would say let's call this Chapter 5 files, whatever you want to call it. So I can rename that. And if I open it, I can see that all of the files are in there. So compressing that just makes it a little bit easier to submit those files. To me, you're just submitting one folder instead of trying to select all 8 files and put them into I think it was 8 files that you're putting into Blackboard. The other thing you could do is I can right click anywhere and I can choose new folder. If this cooperates with me. Hello. New. This is taking a minute for some reason. Well, one thing while we're waiting here for my computer to run is I have finally gotten all my computer problems fixed. So hopefully I'll get caught up on grading here in the next couple days. Can finally create videos again and be a part of videos again and access all the things I need to access. So kudos to our IT people. They've spent hours on the phone with me trying to get my computer working. So I do appreciate all their work with that. Okay, so I created a new file here. If I just call it Chapter 5 Files, and then I could move all this information. So one thing I should point out, when I did this before, notice it copied the files and put them in this folder, kept them here. Doing it this way, I would be moving all these files into this folder first, and then I can right click on it and choose send to compressed zip folder. And then notice now I have 2. I have one that's the regular folder and one that's the zipped folder. So either way, in the end, when you submit it, I have no idea how you did it. It's just that you did it and you're keeping them all in one space together, so it's easier for you to submit those files. In the end, it really doesn't matter to me if you have it zipped or not, even though that's part of my directions. I just thought it might be easier for you to get them all in one spot before you're trying to zip them, because there are so many files that you're having to upload here. So again, this week, there is no assignment beyond what you're doing in the book. So I want you just to work through Chapter 5, and that's what you're submitting for me. There's nothing out of the workbook for this week. Also, please note, moving forward from this point on, I'm going to have suggested due dates. So typically I would open the file or the folder, the learning plan today, and everything would be due next Wednesday, which is April 22nd. From now on, I'll have a suggested due date. The actual due date is going to be May 8th, which is the last day of class. Most of you are having no problems keeping up, but there's a few of you who are having troubles keeping up now that we've switched everything to online. And with the technology issues I just had in the last week, I can't even imagine if anybody is struggling how hard it can be to keep up. So I certainly understand that. I actually had a student suggest this to me, that another instructor had opened everything up to be due at the end. My fear always with that is that you just put it off and all of a sudden you're in the last week and it's like, oh my gosh, I got all this work to do. So that's why I'm going to have these suggested due dates. If you stick with those, you'll have no problem continuing on. But I also know that a lot of you are in multiple classes and it's been hard to keep up. So I just want to let you know that nothing will be marked late. Everything's going to be due May 8th. So if you need a little reprieve or a little grace, 1 week, no problem. Just get it turned in by May 8th instead. So you always see suggested due dates. Everything needs to be turned in by May 8th. I'm not going to go back and adjust any due dates in Blackboard. So if you do have work that's missing that you want to turn in, please go back and do that. Blackboard's still going to mark it late, but just know I won't take off points for it being late. It'll just be marked late in Blackboard. It would take me a long time to go back and adjust all those due dates. So I'm going to keep them where they are, but just know if there's anything you have not turned in and you want to still turn in, you're welcome to do that. Everything just needs to be turned in by May 8th. Hope you are doing well. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.